You're listening to The Hard Truth with John Deaton. John Deaton is a Marine veteran, lawyer, and best-selling author who stared down poverty, survived street violence, and beat cancer to fight another day. From the streets to the courtroom, Deaton has taken on corporate greed and fought against government fraud and overreach. Always for the little guy, a proud father of 3 girls, Deaton brings you the raw, unfiltered truth that hits hard and holds nothing back. Join us as we dive into his journey, his vision, and what he hopes to bring to the people of Massachusetts.
Don't touch that dial or change the channel because it's Sunday at 7 p.m. on WRKO. You're listening to The Hard Truth, and I'm John Deaton. Good evening, everyone. If you want to reach me at the show, you can contact me at john@hardshowtruth.com, john@hardtruthshow.com. I will read your emails, answer your questions, or even read your criticisms as I have in the past. We'll continue that. If you can tell that there is a different tone in my voice, if I'm not as enthusiastic or energetic as I normally am, it's because I received some news about 4 hours ago before recording the show. And it's the kind of news that you never want to get and you never want to hear. And that is my kid's sister, NORMA, passed away at the young age of 53 years old. And NORMA was my younger sister. Obviously, she was the 5th child of my mother. She had a different father. Unfortunately, like my father, he was a deadbeat dad that didn't pay attention to her, didn't take an active role in her life, and she paid the price. And I'm a father of 3 daughters, and I can tell you out there, if you have girls, I would never, ever minimize the impact that a mom has. I think moms are the most important people on this planet. God knows that I think my mom was. And, but girls, they need to feel loved by their father. And they need to feel that they're worthy of their father's time. And I know that my sister Norma, I felt that way about my dad as a boy and as a young man. But I think it plays a much significant role, more so with a girl, when she believes that her father does not give a crap about her. And I know that that's how Norma felt basically all her life from her biological father. And so another thing I want to share is that my sister Norma, and I write about this in my book, and I'm going to read a part of my book about Norma. My book, as you know, is called Food Stamp Warrior. And Norma battled drugs from an early age. We lived in the inner city in Detroit. We were surrounded by drugs and violence all our lives in our childhood. And when it's around you like that, it becomes very difficult to avoid the temptation to participate and experiment with drugs. A lot of people ask me why I never did. Now, I talk about my own problem once I got hurt in the Marine Corps and they gave me OxyContin, and I talk about addiction like that. But back in those early years, surrounded in the hood, in the ghetto, with crack cocaine all around the neighborhood, I didn't participate because of my hatred of poverty and my hatred of what drugs and alcohol did to families. And so I'm one of the lucky ones. I don't know why I felt that way so much that I would say no to the hardcore stuff. And my sister Norma or my other siblings didn't. I don't know why I got lucky to have that chip in my brain that said, no, don't go down this road in your early part of your life. And so Norma, unfortunately, got hooked on crack, like many in the neighborhood, and it took her down the wrong path. And once you go down that path, then all kinds of bad things happen. You start committing crimes, as Norma did. You start writing bad checks. You start stealing. You start committing felonies. Your credit goes down the drain. You lose your liberty. You go to prison. You have a criminal record. It affects your employment for the rest of your life. And so by the time you're 25 years old, if you've taken that path, you can still recover. You can still get out, but many can't. And I don't know for sure what caused Norma's death, but, I heard that she had fallen and hit her head, and she refused to go to the emergency room, and she stayed at home, and her husband didn't call an ambulance. And when he went to check on her this morning, she had passed. And so I'm going to dedicate this show to my sister Norma. May she rest in peace. And may God take care of her from now on. So I'm going to read you a little bit of the passage about my sister that I wrote in the book. Me and Norma had a very complicated relationship. I helped her as much as I could, but when she wouldn't stop using drugs, I stopped helping her. And through the years, that caused a strain, because once you become very successful and you have money, family members will look to you to maybe help. And I did, and I helped quite a few times. But when you stop helping and they see that you have money and you have this success and you won't help anymore because they're not helping themselves and not making the right decisions, it can strain, a sibling's relationship. So I'm going to read you a little bit from Food Stamp Warrior. Bear with me, because this is from my sister. Norma was always a free spirit. Sadly, as she would learn, she suffered from bipolar disorder. She also suffered from being the daughter of Sam Abelson. And my mother left Sam for good. He didn't make much effort to be a consistent presence in Norma's life. In fact, he was absent 90% of the time until her 20s. Norma didn't even carry his last name. Her birth certificate says Norma Deaton. Norma has a great heart and a generous spirit, but her trouble and addiction have cost her deeply. It was an incident involving Norma that caused my mother to once tell me that I might be the most cold-hearted person that she had ever met. And I said to my mom, coming from you, Mom, the most forgiving, warm-hearted person that I know, your criticism is relative. Of course, my mother didn't know what the word relative meant, and in that instance, she didn't care to know. My mother was upset at me because I wouldn't take her money and bail Norma out of jail. And the reason was 6 months earlier, I had already bailed Norma out of jail, and I negotiated an incredible plea deal. When I was in the Marine Corps stationed in Yuma, Arizona, Norma and her then 3-year-old son, Brandon, came to live with me and my ex-wife. It was my first year of marriage, and if that wasn't challenging enough, now I had thrown in a crazy bipolar sister and her infant son. Norma had intentionally written bad checks throughout Yuma, Arizona. The problem is that Norma had already been convicted of multiple felonies, and now she faced several years in prison for writing these bad checks. Because I was the chief prosecutor for the Marine base and had worked with the civilian district attorney on a murder case, I called in a favor for Norma. After I paid several $1,000s to cover the bad checks, the DA agreed. The charge is down to a misdemeanor. Norma was getting a slap on the wrist. Now, I'm a man of my word. It's probably the thing in which I take the most pride. If I say I'm going to do something, I always do it, even if I don't want to do it. And if it will cost me greatly, I do it. If you ask my family, it's likely the one thing they would all agree on about me. To tell it straight, I had warned Tina that if she ever threatened to hurt my mother, I would come back and hurt myself in some way to save her and throw her in jail. It's my other sister, Tina. That's another story I'll tell you at another time, but it's in my book. But this time it was Norma who heard my promise. I told her that I would help her this one time. I paid her debt, bailed her out of jail, and got her a sweetheart deal from the DA. I warned Norma, however, that if she wrote one more bad check or stole money or got arrested again, it was over. Not only would I not bail her out again, but I wouldn't walk the check over to the courthouse, even if Toby, my brother, and my mother sent the money. I called my mother and my brother, and I told them the same. About 3 to 6 months later, Norma did it again and cashed thousands of checks, thousands of dollars in bad checks. It wasn't just the drugs for Norma anymore. In addition to the drug addiction, she had become addicted to gambling at a casino not too far from where we lived. Once again, it turned out she was living more like my father's daughter than the daughter of another man. True to my word, I did not bail Norma out, and I did not call the DA to cut a new deal. I visited Norma once in lockup to inform her that I would honor my word, as I always do. I also knew that Norma would absolutely jump bail and run. She was facing at least 1 year, if not 2, in prison. I also told Norma I was going to call Brandon's father and instruct him that I would take care of Brandon until he could come pick him up. I instructed my then 3-year-old nephew's father that if he did not come to claim Brandon, I would take legal steps to adopt my 3-year-old nephew and extinguish his and Norma's parental rights. I told my sister that she had probably lost custody because she was going to spend a year in prison. When I come back, I'll finish the story of my sister Norma. You're listening to The Hard Truth, and I'm John Deaton. Welcome back to The Hard Truth. You're listening to 680 AM WRKO, and this is The Hard Truth with John Deaton. Before the break, I broke the news that my sister Norma had passed away today, and I'm doing the first 2 segments of this show to honor my sister. My sister and I had a tough relationship because, as I was saying in the first break, after I had helped her and my nephew and took care of them and spent thousands and thousands of dollars bailing her out, I told her and got her a great deal with the district attorney's office that if she continued to write bad checks, to steal, to defraud people, that I would stop helping her, that I wasn't going to spend my money to help her gamble or do drugs and things of that nature. And, you know, I'm not going to sit here and read the book. I guess I'm a little lost, to be honest with you. You know, grieving is different for everybody. I'm not a very public person, pretty private. I guess what I should tell people out there is that, you know, relationships are difficult. Whether you're married or whether it's a loved one or whether it's a best friend or whether it's a sibling. And life is so short. My sister Norma died today, 53 years old. That is so young. There's still so much life to experience. There's still so much joy that you can have. And unfortunately, she won't get to experience that joy and experience those happy moments. So if you find yourself in an estranged relationship, you can still text. You can still check up on a person. Norma and I would, send messages through our siblings, let her know that I loved her. She was very upset at me for a while because I wrote this book, Food Stamp Warrior, and in the book I talk about her addiction. And I talk about how she lost custody of my nephew that I just told you about. And the whole point of that story was that after I had bailed her out and took care of her son and spent thousands of dollars, and went on a limb for her, she was addicted. And that's what addiction does. It takes you over the person's brain. And so when she was in jail that time, my mother called me and she said, John, I'll send you the money to bail Norma out. And I knew Norma would skip and my mother would never see the money. And I told my mother no. I said, I gave my word to my sister that if she yet again did these things, that I would stop helping her. And you have to be a person of your word. And if I just continue to help her, then I become a crutch. And I would tell my mom, you're being a crutch. She knows you'll bail her out. She knows you'll give the money. And when my mother said to me, so if I send the money Western Union, you won't go pick it up and drop it at the jail? I said, no, Mom. I said I would stop helping. That's helping. I'm not going to help her with her addiction. And my mother said to me, well, you might just be the coldest person that I've ever met, son. And, sometimes it's tough to be hard. I think I was right, but it doesn't make it easier to be right. It doesn't feel good sometimes to be that way, even though I truly believe that's the way you got to be. And so, a 53-year-old woman, mother of two, is gone. And in a large part, she's gone because of drugs. I don't know if there'll be an autopsy, and the autopsy will tell us that drugs played a role or not. But I am so sick of this epidemic that we do nothing about. One of the reasons that I ran for Senate was because of the fentanyl that was flooding our streets with an open border. You're talking about millions of Americans are losing their life to drugs. The fentanyl is contaminated, and the marijuana's killing people because of the fentanyl. And I couldn't understand why these politicians in Washington, they do nothing about it. Like, your fellow Americans are dying. And you want to talk politics and you want to say, oh, I can't shut the border down because of this or that, when you can. And so we have to deal with this epidemic. And you've got people like Ed Markey, you got people like Elizabeth Warren, and you got these people that say, well, our solution is to give them cleaner needles. That's not the solution. The solution is to have a zero tolerance for drugs. It is to force treatment or prison. It's the only way. Trust me. Once I got hurt in the Marine Corps, they gave me OxyContin, big, high doses of OxyContin, and they said to me, hey, good news, John. This pill, this new OxyContin, it's not addictive. And they put me on 120 milligrams a day. Every 12 hours, I take a 60 milligram pill of OxyContin. After a couple multiple surgeries of my spine. And I'm telling you, after 3 months, Every 12 hours of taking one of those pills, my body became addicted and dependent on those pills. And so I know what addiction's like. I know what it's like when you're caught, you're a prisoner. People who are addiction and they're addicts, I should say, and they're addicted to drugs, they're in prison. If it's pills, then you count the pills you have and how long those pills will last you before you can get new pills. I remember counting pills like, John, can you want to go out over the weekend? And I know that, well, if I'll have to take an extra pill to do that. And if I don't take that extra pill, then I might start getting withdrawals because my body is yearning for that higher dose that I'm on. And all of a sudden, I'll have diarrhea. And all of a sudden, I'll have a stomach ache. And so you don't even take the pills sometimes to get high. You're not trying to feel better. You're not trying to get stoned or anything like that. You just don't want to be sick. You don't want to have diarrhea and poop your pants because that's what happens when you start going through withdrawals. These drugs are so strong. So I guess what I'm saying is that you never expect to get the text or the call that your young sibling has passed away. You think that, well, I'll see that person in a few years or a couple years. The last time I saw NORMA was, when my mother died. So that would be March of 2020. And I haven't seen NORMA since. So that would be 5 years. And so in those 5 years, now that I have gotten that text, now that I have gotten that call that my young sibling is no longer here, of course I wish I would have texted or made a random phone call and said, hey, just checking in. You know, I know we don't talk a lot. I know we've had a complicated relationship through the years, but I love you. And I do think of you sometimes, and I hope you're doing okay. And so if there's someone in your life like that, you know, maybe it's worth thinking about, because when I got the text from my oldest sister that my youngest, not my youngest, but my younger sister was dead, it hit me in a way that I didn't think it would, to be honest with you. Not that I didn't think I would cry, not that I didn't think I would grieve, not that I wouldn't have sorrow. I just didn't expect in the early 50s that she would go. I didn't expect that there wouldn't be another birthday celebration or her daughter's college graduation that I could go to, that I could say, hey, hope things are going okay. So just my food for thought for you today. So listen, if you want to reach the show, you contact me at email john@hardtruthshow.com. That's john@hardtruthshow.com. Welcome back to the show. You're listening to The Hard Truth. This is John Deaton. You can reach me at john@hardtruthshow.com, john@hardtruthshow.com. Next week, maybe we'll get to some of those emails, messages, even criticisms. So last week's show, I went over politics and the division and everything that's taken place, and the fact that the big new bill had passed the Senate and it was headed to the House. And I talked about some of the good things that President Trump has done and my ultimate position was that the big, beautiful bill, it's big, but it's far from beautiful. And in fact, I can look anyone in the face and say that if I was in the Senate, I would not have voted yes, with the caveat of something. And that something is, I wouldn't have voted yes as a Massachusetts senator for the bill in its present form. But I might have well done something that Lisa Murkowski did in Alaska. Now, in Alaska, Lisa Murkowski is considered by some of you on the far right as a rhino, as somebody who is not a Trump supporter. She's a moderate, and yet she voted for the bill. She was a vote that President Trump needed. And you know what she did? She said, I don't like this bill. I don't like it at all. But I voted for it because Alaska got something out of it. And I, as an American, don't like the bill overall, but my duty to Alaskans made me vote yes, because Alaska got things out of this big, beautiful bill. That is a voice. She gave Alaska a voice in the United States Senate, whether you like her, don't like her, agree or disagree with her. So when I say that I don't like the big, beautiful bill, I'm going to tell you why, but I'm not going to say that there's no way that I would have voted for it, but I would have given Massachusetts a voice. And I would have said that if I'm going to vote yes for this bill, what does Massachusetts get? Just like Lisa Murkowski said about what does Alaska get. I'll give you an example. The two Democratic senators, Senator Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey, they voted no against the big, beautiful bill because Donald Trump's name is on the big, beautiful bill, right? It's Trump's proposal. So we know whether it's good for Massachusetts, not good for Massachusetts, good for America, not good for America. Because it's associated with Trump and Trump's administration, there's just no possible way they're ever going to vote yes. So they voted no. Now let's back up. So there's no voice there for Massachusetts. But let's back up a few years ago where there was a president of their party. Joe Biden, a Democrat, is the president. Now, do they have a voice? Do they give a voice in the United States Senate to Massachusetts when their party is in power? And the answer is absolutely not. Elizabeth Warren may have a voice. She's a big voice, right? She's a national politician. She goes on all the Sunday shows and the nightly shows on MSNBC, and she talks a good game. But that's not the question. The question is, did you give Massachusetts a voice in the Senate? And the point I'm getting at is, do you remember the infrastructure bill that Joe Biden passed that Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey voted yes for, where they bragged, look what Joe Biden's done, an infrastructure bill. This is a big deal. So I want to share with you the infrastructure bill that they voted yes to had $110 billion just for bridges. That's it. For bridges across America, there was an allocation of $110 billion. Do we have any bridges in Massachusetts that need repair? Oh, we know the Army Corps of Engineers have said that the two Cape Cod bridges are effectively structurally in disrepair to where they got to be shut down. They're going to have to close one lane. They're going to have to work on their $6 billion because they are functionally obsolete. That's what the Army Corps of Engineers said about the 2 bridges on the Cape, which, by the way, are owned by the federal government. They're not owned by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They're owned by the federal government. And the federal government passed the bill, and the 2 federal senators, Warren and Markey, who voted for that bill, didn't fight for Massachusetts. They did not say, hey, wait a minute, of that $110 billion, we got to at least get a few billion for our bridges here in Massachusetts. They didn't do that. They don't do that because they don't give Massachusetts a voice. They're Democrats. If the president is a Democrat and he says, I want this bill to be passed, they're going to say yes. They're guaranteed yeses for Democrat bills. They're guaranteed no's for Republican bills. That's who they are. That's not a voice. We need to send somebody to the United States Senate that gives people a voice. So just think of that. Not a dollar from the infrastructure bill, yet they voted for it. So if I was in the Senate as a Republican, I could have voted for the infrastructure bill that Joe Biden proposed, but I just said, what does Massachusetts get? I wouldn't have just said, here's my vote. You can assume I'm going to vote for you. And if I was in the Senate when President Trump is president, I'm not a guaranteed no when President Trump is pushing something. I'm a maybe. Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey are an absolute no, no matter what. I'm a maybe. Is it good for Massachusetts? Is it good for America? If the answer to that question is yes to both, then I will support it. It doesn't matter whether it's considered Republican, Democrat, independent, liberal, conservative. Call it green, call it purple, call it whatever you want. If it's good for Massachusetts and America, I support it. If it's not good for Massachusetts and not good for America, I'm not going to support it. So, in one way, I can tell you that I vote no based on the big, beautiful bill as it is written, as it got passed. If I were in the Senate and they wanted my vote, they're going to have to come to Massachusetts. And that's the other thing. They do all this business in Washington. If I were ever into the United States Senate, I'm going to spend more time in Massachusetts than Washington. You know, and a lot of people say, oh, that's not possible. Bullcrap. You see, there's this thing nowadays people call the internet. And there's this app out there called Zoom. And so we need a bill in the Senate. And one of the bills that I would propose, if I'd have won last year, if I ever run again, one of the first bills I'm going to propose is going to be to adopt a rule in the Senate or in the House, in both, that allow the United States Senator or the U.S. representative from the House to be present or vote via Zoom. You can see the person that's them. There's a microphone. When they say yay or nay, you can get up and put your thumbs up or your thumbs down, say yay or say nay. Why do these Washington politicians have to be in Washington? That's all they do. And you want to know something? If I'm in the United States Senate, then they got to come to Boston, and they got to come to Springfield, and they got to come to the Cape. Meet me there. Let's talk business, but be able to answer this question, President Trump. What's in it for Massachusetts? How is it good for the Commonwealth? That's what I want to know. That is giving a voice to Massachusetts in the United States Senate. We have not had a voice since Ted Kennedy. Ted Kennedy's politics might be, more left than me, certainly. There's no doubt about that. We would disagree on policy. I'm sure there's no doubt about that. But man, you can't question Ted Kennedy's commitment to Massachusetts. You could never question that. You know that he fought for Massachusetts. Even if he was fighting for the wrong result, you knew that it was with the right intent for Massachusetts. And so that's the problem that we have. And that's what happens when you have a one-party rule. Every single federal seat in Massachusetts is occupied by a Democrat. That's not healthy. All 9 congressmen and women, Democrats. Both U.S. senators, Democrats. And some of them are far left radicals. I mean, Ed Markey is the co-author of the Green New Deal. How are all those alternative energy mandates that you're being taxed, that you're seeing on your electric bills this summer? How's that going for you? That's Ed Markey's policies. Open borders, Ed Markey's policies. Boys going against girls, biological men against women, Ed Markey's. You're listening to The Hard Truth. We'll be right back. I'm John Deaton. Welcome back to The Hard Truth. You're listening to John Deaton on WRKO. Listen, you can email me at john@hardtruthshow.com, john@hardtruthshow.com. You can follow me on X at John E. Deaton1. And you can always, if you want to know everything there is to know about me, you can pick up Food Stamp Warrior by me, John Deaton, a memoir of my life. I can assure you that book is not boring. If you read it, you're going to be surprised at all the things I admit, say, and all of that. In fact, I put everything out there so much that there was nothing that Elizabeth Warren and her team could find to say anything negative about John Deaton that John Deaton had already written in his book, Food Stamp Warrior. So I promise you won't be bored if you pick it up. It's on Amazon. And also, as you know, I am a lawyer, the Deaton Law Firm. I represent mesothelioma, lung cancer victims against major corporations and insurance companies. So if you have mesothelioma or been diagnosed with lung cancer, you were exposed to asbestos, you can reach me at thedeatonlawfirm.com. Now, back to the big, beautiful bill that's not so beautiful. Before I say it, let me just remind you that I think that President Trump has done some really good things. Border security, amazing. Illegal crossings down 93%. Deregulation of the energy sector. That's great news because energy cost, oil, all the transportation cost, whether it's a boat, ship in the ocean, or whether it's an 18-wheeler going across country that is delivering products. Oil and energy cost is the number one cost of inflation and prices. So if we can get energy costs down, then that's going to affect egg prices, grocery prices. It's going to affect all kinds of prices. So deregulation, certainly of the energy sector, outstanding. Also the business sector. We got to get that deregulation here in the Commonwealth. We have a housing crisis, yet it takes 2 years for builders to pull permits to build homes. It's crazy. There's all these new green energy mandates that they got to comply with. They can't use natural gas pipelines to build homes in the middle of a housing crisis. We got to change that. We got to deregulate here in the Commonwealth as well. President Trump's got NATO to pick up more members to pick up the tab more. So Germany, Canada saying, hey, we're going to contribute $100 billion more to our own defense. So the United States does not have to flip the bill for everyone. We've got fentanyl crackdown on the cartels. So drugs are coming across the border are down. All those things, companies, $2 trillion are investing in America. Those are all great things. All great things. Big, beautiful bill is not one of them. So, and the main reason is when people ask me, what policy of Donald Trump would you oppose? My first answer is always going to be, if it's going to increase the deficit and there's not a plan that is so pro-growth that it's going to offset the deficit because our GDP is going to increase significantly, then I won't support it. Because I'm someone who believes that $37 trillion in a national debt is a crisis. Now, some of you out there think it's not a crisis because, well, the government can just print more money. So let's just print some more money and create some more debt and make it from 37 trillion to 40 trillion to 50 trillion. Well, when you start spending more on interest than you do on your national defense, you got a problem. We have a debt problem in this country. Credit card debt's at $1.3 trillion. Student loan debt's at $1.8 trillion. The national debt, again, $37 trillion. We pay $8 trillion in interest, more than $1 trillion per year. It is an absolute mess. We have a debt ceiling, and every 3 months, Washington will increase the debt ceiling, and they'll pass a continuing resolution that just keeps raising the debt. And these politicians, including President Trump, they don't like the debt ceiling. You want to know why? Because the debt ceiling forces them to try to be fiscally responsible. If you don't raise the debt ceiling, then you can't go past it. It's just the way it is. But they'll continue to vote to raise it. And they threaten government shutdowns. Oh, it's going to be a government shutdown if we don't raise the debt ceiling, so we raise the debt ceiling. So President Trump said something to me that's the scariest thing that he could say. And he said he agrees with Elizabeth Warren. And I was turning my head, almost did The Exorcist. What? Agree with Elizabeth Warren on what? Because I don't agree with Elizabeth Warren on anything. And what he said was that him and Elizabeth Warren agree that the debt ceiling should be eliminated so that we're not bothered with that debt ceiling. Now, I want you to think about that, people. Why would President Trump agree with Elizabeth Warren that there shouldn't be a debt ceiling? It's because he's in control and he's in power. And he doesn't want, I understand it, he doesn't want the Democrats to say, we're not going to vote to increase the debt ceiling. We're going to have a government shutdown while he's the president. He doesn't want that. He just doesn't want to be bothered. He wants to be able to do what he wants, spend what he wants, and not have to deal with that kind of hassle. But that hassle is meant, that's like, if any one of us at home, if we run out of credit cards and we run out of money in our checking account, we can't print new money, right? And if we're behind and we're maxed out on credit cards, we're not going to be able to go get a new credit card. We're going to have to face responsibility of our spending. We're going to have to make some hard choices in our personal life. Does that mean we can't eat out anymore for a while? Sure. Does that mean no more new clothes for either one? Sure. Does that mean that the vacation that we take, we can't do as much as we want? Sure. Going to be choices we don't want to make. We make them in our personal lives all the time. We make sacrifices in our personal lives all the time. But these people in Washington, they can't. They don't want to. And Donald Trump in power is no different than them. And so when he said he agreed with Elizabeth Warren, it shocked me. Okay? So this bill, let me be clear. There are some good things, of course, in the bill. I'm not saying that the bill has got nothing good about it. I waited tables for 17 years, put myself through high school, college, law school. So no tax on tips up to $25,000. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. That's for working people. I like it. No tax on overtime, which is capped, by the way, at $12,500. So when these politicians say to you, there's no tax on tips, That doesn't mean all tips. There's a cap, $25,000. No tax on overtime, up to $12,500. You get taxed after $12,500, but that's good. That gives people a higher wage, puts more money in their pocket that they can enjoy life, they can pay their bills and things like that. Okay? Now, understand that when we talk about these tax cuts, that if you make $35,000 or less, you don't pay taxes. Almost every single person that has $35,000 or less in income gets a full federal income tax refund. They don't pay any because the standard deduction, let me make sure I got it right. Standard deduction is $14,600 now. And if it's a married couple, it's $29,200. Well, when you take that and you take the the child tax credit, and you take the earned income tax credit, you get full refunds. So when they say they gave a tax cut, you're not seeing a tax cut. And if you do get a tax cut and you make under $50,000 a year, you know what your tax, it's $60. It's $60 to $100 capped. $200 to $460 a year. If that's what you make, $200,000 to $460, then you're going to get back $5,000 to $10,000 in taxes. You're going to pay less in taxes, $5,000 to $10,000. If you make $460,000 to $1.1 million, then you get $21,000 back in taxes. Okay? Now let's go to the top 1%. The top 1% in this country is if you make $1.1 million or above, to say $5 million, you're going to get $68,000 back in taxes, about 5 to 6% of your after-tax income. Okay, now let's go to the top 0.01%. That means that you make $5 million a year or more, $5 million or more. You get $400,000 back. So understand with these tax cuts, 70% of the net tax cuts go to the top 20%. The top 5% earners get 45% of all the tax cuts. So you have to ask yourself, is it worth it to give that and increase the national debt between $3 and $5 trillion? $3 and $5 trillion. I say that it's not worth it. And I say that if you're making that kind of money, $5 million to much more than $5 million, you don't need the $400,000 tax cut. And the people who are making $50,000 or less, they don't need the $60. It's not going to make a difference to increase our deficit by $3 to $5 trillion. See you next week. You listen to The Hard Truth.
You're listening to The Hard Truth with John Deaton. John Deaton is a Marine veteran, lawyer, and best-selling author who stared down poverty, survived street violence, and beat cancer to fight another day. From the streets to the courtroom, Deaton has taken on corporate greed and fought against government fraud and overreach. Always for the little guy, a proud father of 3 girls, Deaton brings you the raw, unfiltered truth that hits hard and holds nothing back. Join us as we dive into his journey, his vision, and what he hopes to bring to the people of Massachusetts.